I didn't realize I was losing my life until the day my own mother smiled and said, "This is for your own good." That was the moment I understood. Loving a narcissistic parent can quietly destroy you without leaving a single bruise. For most people, control looks obvious: shouting, threats, violence. But for me, it came wrapped in concern, sacrifice, and the constant reminder that I owed her everything. If you had met my mother, you would have liked her instantly. She was charming, organized, always the victim in every story she told. And I was her proof of success, her daughter, her project. At least that's what I thought. I believed obedience was love. I believed silence was respect. I believed that if I just tried harder, she would finally be proud of me. That belief cost me years of my life, because control doesn't start with chains. It starts with small decisions being made for you: where you study, who you date, how you spend your money, what you're allowed to dream about. And when you question it, you're told you're ungrateful. This isn't a story about sudden betrayal. It's a revenge story that began so quietly, I didn't even know I was trapped. The warning signs were there: the guilt disguised as love, the constant comparisons, the way my confidence slowly disappeared, replaced by fear of disappointing her. Every time something went wrong in my life, she somehow became the hero, and I became the problem. And I believed her. I told myself this was normal, that all parents were like this, that feeling small was the price of being taken care of. Until the day I discovered the truth. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a single moment where the mask slipped and I saw how much she needed to control me to feel powerful. That was the beginning of the end. What followed wasn't loud. There was no screaming match, no explosive confrontation, just patience, observation, and the slow understanding of how karma works when you stop fighting and start letting people reveal who they really are. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't have to, because when a narcissistic parent believes they own you, they eventually overreach. They get careless. They assume you'll never leave. And that's when everything changes. This is not a story about hatred. It's about awakening, about the terrifying moment when you realize the person who raised you is also the person holding you back, and about how sometimes the most powerful revenge story isn't what you do to them. It's what happens when you finally stop letting them control you. What happened next shattered the image of my mother forever and forced me to choose between losing her approval or losing myself. And trust me, she never saw my choice coming. Growing up, I thought my childhood was normal, quiet, structured, predictable. My mother liked it that way. She raised me alone, and she never let me forget it. Every meal, every school supply, every sacrifice was carefully logged, not on paper, but in her tone, her sighs, her stories told to relatives. I learned early that gratitude wasn't something you felt, it was something you performed. To the outside world, she was a devoted parent. To me, she was a constant presence in my head. What will people think? You're too sensitive. I know what's best for you. That was the language of my childhood. Living with a narcissistic parent doesn't feel abusive at first. It feels conditional. Love came when I agreed. Approval came when I obeyed. Silence came when I tried to be myself. I was a good student, not because I loved studying, but because success made her look good. I chose a career path she approved of, not because it inspired me, but because disagreement led to days of cold distance that felt unbearable. And whenever I tried to pull away, she'd remind me of everything she'd given up for me. So I stayed. I told myself I was lucky. At least she cared, right? By my early 20s, my life looked impressive from the outside. Stable job, clean apartment, no scandals, no drama. Inside, I felt hollow. Every decision went through her filter first. Every choice carried the fear of punishment disguised as disappointment. She controlled my finances to help me save. She questioned my friendships to protect me. She criticized my relationships because she could see red flags I couldn't. And slowly, without realizing it, I stopped trusting myself. That's the quiet danger of this kind of control. You don't feel imprisoned, you feel incapable. This wasn't yet a revenge story. It was a story of survival. I remember the first time I tried to assert myself. I told her I wanted to move to another city for a better opportunity. She didn't yell, she didn't forbid it. She laughed. A soft, dismissive laugh, like a parent indulging a child's fantasy. "You wouldn't last 6 months," she said. "You're not built for that." That sentence stayed with me longer than any insult ever could. And when I didn't go, she was kind again, warm, proud. That's when I learned the rules. Obedience brought peace. Independence brought chaos. So I stayed close. I checked in. I shared everything, because hiding things led to interrogation. I thought transparency was trust. I was wrong. Because trust only flows one way when you're dealing with a narcissistic parent, and every secret you share becomes a tool. I didn't know it yet, but the foundation was being laid, the kind that collapses suddenly, but only after years of quiet pressure. And when it finally broke, it wouldn't just change how I saw my mother, it would change how karma showed up in both our lives. That realization was closer than I thought. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't dramatic. It was a feeling, a subtle shift in how my mother listened, how her questions became sharper, how her concern felt rehearsed. She started asking about things she'd never cared about before: my salary, my savings, my plans for the next 5 years. At first, I didn't question it. She'd always been involved. This felt normal. That's how a narcissistic parent gets away with it. They don't change suddenly. They tighten the grip slowly. I noticed small inconsistencies, comments she made that suggested she knew things I hadn't told her, people repeating my private thoughts back to me, almost word for word. When I asked how they knew, they'd say, "Your mom mentioned it." I laughed it off. She was proud of me, I told myself. But pride started sounding a lot like ownership. She began offering help I didn't ask for, contacting people on my behalf, fixing situations that weren't broken. And when I told her to stop, she acted hurt. "I'm just trying to support you," she said. "You're pushing me away." The guilt worked. It always had. Then came the gaslighting, subtle, persistent. She'd deny things she clearly said, rewrite conversations, question my memory. "You're imagining problems," she'd tell me. "You've always been dramatic." I started keeping notes, not because I planned revenge, but because I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. This still wasn't a revenge story. It was confusion. I remember one evening vividly. I had shared a tentative plan with her, something I was excited about, something just for me. A few days later, she brought it up in front of extended family, mocking it as unrealistic. Everyone laughed. I smiled. Inside, something cracked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed years of moments like this. My confidence chipped away in public, my doubts amplified in private. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I'd never allowed before. What if she needs me small? Once that thought enters your mind, everything looks different. I started watching instead of reacting, listening instead of explaining. And that's when the pattern became undeniable. She thrived when I struggled. She calmed down when I felt insecure. She became anxious when I showed independence. Control wasn't a side effect, it was the goal. Living under a narcissistic parent means betrayal doesn't come as a single act. It's 1,000 tiny violations of trust, each one plausible on its own. Still, I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready. Because deep down, I still hoped I was wrong, that there was another explanation, that love was just complicated. I had no idea how far she'd already gone. The real betrayal wasn't emotional, it was practical, calculated, and I was about to stumble into it without realizing the trap had already been set. That's when karma began lining things up, not loudly, but patiently, and once the truth surfaced, there would be no way to pretend anymore. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or tears, it came with a document. I was sorting through paperwork one evening, doing something painfully ordinary, when I noticed a name where mine should have been. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, a clerical error, something easily explained. Then I saw the signature, my mother's. My hands started shaking, not violently, but enough that I had to sit down. I reread the page slowly, line by line, hoping my brain would rearrange the words into something harmless. It didn't. She hadn't just helped me, she had positioned herself between me and my own life. Accounts, permissions, decisions I thought were mine, quietly redirected through her. Nothing illegal on the surface, just enough authority to override me whenever she felt it was necessary, or convenient. I confronted her carefully, calmly, like someone walking on thin ice. She didn't deny it. Instead, she smiled the same gentle smile I'd seen my entire life. I did it to protect you. You're not ready to handle everything on your own. That sentence broke something in me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was familiar. It was the same justification she'd used for every boundary she crossed, every time she shrank my world. This was the moment the illusion died. Living with a narcissistic parent teaches you to doubt your instincts, but in that silence after she spoke, my instincts were suddenly loud. I realized this wasn't about care, it was about control. I felt grief before anger, grief for the version of her I thought existed, grief for the years I spent trying to earn freedom that was never meant to be given. I didn't scream, I didn't accuse. I went quiet. That scared her. She filled the space with explanations, guilt, even tears, switching tactics when one didn't work. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was finally seeing. This wasn't yet a revenge story. It was the moment clarity replaced hope. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling something new beneath the sadness. Detachment. I stopped asking why she did it. I started asking how she benefited. And once you ask that question with a narcissistic parent, the answer is always the same. Power. I knew then that confronting her directly would change nothing. Control like this doesn't release itself because it's challenged. It collapses when it's no longer fed. So I did the one thing she never expected. I let her think she'd won. I apologized. I thanked her. I played the role she was comfortable with. And behind that performance, I began quietly reclaiming my life. This was where patience became my greatest weapon. Because karma doesn't rush. It waits until the structure someone built on lies becomes too heavy to hold itself up. And my mother had built hers entirely around me. She had no idea that by trying to control me completely, she had finally shown me exactly how to walk away without saying a word. I didn't change overnight. That was the key. To my mother, everything looked the same. I still called, I still listened, I still nodded at her advice. If anything, I became easier to manage, and that made her careless. This is the part people misunderstand about a revenge story like mine. There was no master plan at first, just observation, quiet adjustments, small decisions made without announcing them. When you grow up with a narcissistic parent, you learn how to read moods the way others read traffic signs. I knew when she felt powerful and when she felt threatened, so I stopped threatening her. I shared less, I asked fewer questions, I let her talk. People like her reveal everything when they think they're in control. I began separating my life piece by piece, not dramatically, not defiantly, just logically. I redirected income streams she didn't track closely. I learned which permissions could be changed quietly and which ones required time. And I didn't rush, because rushing would have exposed me. She, meanwhile, grew more confident. She bragged to relatives about how involved she still was in my life, how much I needed her, how she was the reason I was stable. I let her believe that. The irony was painful. The more independence I built, the more she clung to the illusion of control. This wasn't a revenge fueled by anger, it was fueled by clarity. Every move I made was boring on the surface. Paperwork, emails, waiting periods, professional advice I sought without mentioning her name, the kind of steps no one notices until they're complete. She tested me occasionally, pushed boundaries just to see if I'd push back. I didn't. I stayed pleasant, agreeable. And that confused her. A narcissistic parent expects resistance. They feed on it. When it disappears, they assume submission has deepened. That assumption became her biggest mistake. I watched her make promises she couldn't keep, take credit for things she didn't control anymore, speak on my behalf in rooms where her influence was fading. She didn't realize the foundation was shifting. This was the quietest part of the revenge story, and the most dangerous for her, because once control becomes imaginary, it collapses fast. I felt something unexpected during this phase. Peace. Not joy, not triumph, just the relief of no longer explaining myself. For the first time, I made decisions without rehearsing her reaction. I slept better, I thought more clearly, I stopped flinching when my phone rang. That's when I understood something important. I wasn't taking anything from her, I was simply taking myself back. And in doing so, I removed the one thing that had always protected her from consequences: access. Karma doesn't need cruelty, it just needs truth to be left alone long enough. She still believed she was directing my life. In reality, she was standing on a stage with no audience, delivering lines to a power that no longer existed. And when she finally noticed, it was already too late to fix what she'd broken. The moment karma arrived wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no final argument. It began with confusion. My mother started asking questions she'd never had to ask before. Simple ones, basic ones, the kind that revealed she no longer had access to the answers. At first, she masked it with irritation. "You forgot to tell me something. You didn't loop me in." I apologized, casually, vaguely, and changed nothing. For someone used to total control, uncertainty feels like disrespect. That's when she made her mistake. She tried to reassert authority publicly, correcting me in front of others, speaking on my behalf in rooms where her influence was fading. And when reality didn't match her claims, people noticed. Not because I exposed her, but because I didn't cover for her anymore. This is how karma works in a true revenge story. You step aside and let patterns speak for themselves. She began missing details, over-promising, taking credit where none existed. The confidence that once carried her now sounded hollow. A narcissistic parent depends on the belief that they are essential. Once that belief cracks, everything built on it starts to wobble. She felt it slipping and panicked. Suddenly, she needed reassurance, validation, proof she still mattered. She called more often, asked leading questions, tried guilt, then praise, then subtle threats of withdrawal. None of it worked, because she wasn't losing me, she was losing control, and she didn't know how to exist without it. The final blow came quietly. A situation arose where her intervention would have once saved me. She stepped in confidently, only to realize she had no authority to act. She blamed others, circumstances, me, but the truth was simple. I no longer required her permission to live. Watching her scramble was painful, not satisfying. I saw a woman confronting the emptiness behind her power, a role she'd played for decades, suddenly meaningless. That's the hidden cost of being a narcissistic parent. When control is your identity, losing it feels like losing yourself. People began setting boundaries with her, not because I asked them to, but because she overplayed her hand. The same tactics that once worked on me failed elsewhere, and she didn't adapt. She doubled down. That's when consequences became unavoidable. She lost influence, then trust, then the image she'd spent years curating. This wasn't punishment, it was exposure. Karma didn't take anything from her that she hadn't tied to control. She reached out one last time, desperate and angry, demanding explanations I no longer owed, and for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to respond. Silence did what confrontation never could. It forced her to face the truth she'd been avoiding. She had lost everything she tried to control, not because I destroyed her, but because I stopped carrying her illusion for her. After everything settled, I expected relief, closure, some dramatic sense of victory. Instead, I felt quiet, not empty, just still. When control fades, what's left isn't always anger. Sometimes it's mourning. I grieved the mother I thought I had, the version of her I kept alive in my mind because the truth was too painful to face. That grief was real. Healing from a narcissistic parent isn't about erasing the past. It's about understanding that love and control are not the same thing, even when they arrive in the same voice. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't talk about it. I didn't need to. Her world had shrunk, but mine had finally expanded. For the first time, I trusted my own judgment. I made mistakes, real ones, and survived them. I learned that confidence doesn't come from approval, it comes from self-respect. This revenge story didn't turn me into someone bitter or cruel. It turned me into someone honest. Honest about my limits, honest about my boundaries, honest about what I will never tolerate again. The strangest part was realizing I didn't hate her. I understood her. I saw a woman who confused control with safety, who needed dominance to feel secure, who never learned how to exist without someone beneath her. That understanding didn't excuse her behavior, but it freed me from carrying it. Karma had already done its work, quietly, completely. I moved forward without announcing it, built relationships based on mutual respect, chose silence where explanations once drained me. And in that silence, I found peace. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life, know this: you're not weak for staying, you're not cruel for leaving, and you're not responsible for managing someone else's fear of losing control. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop playing your assigned role. Because when you step out of the story they wrote for you, you don't just change the ending, you reclaim authorship of your life. And that, more than any punishment, is the kind of freedom a narcissistic parent can never take back. If you were in my place, would you have stayed silent or walked away sooner? I still think about that question.